I felt this agonizing pain, and then all of a sudden I'm just lifting right up out of my body. There was this huge, loving, formless presence that appeared, and there was a beautiful, what I call a glorious city. I could hear people talking. I heard music playing. You could tell even now I'm speechless when I talk about it. It's just like, oh my gosh. Sometimes it blows me away. In 2005, I was sitting outside talking on a cordless phone. It started raining. I heard this loud crack and I saw the lightning. And as soon as I saw it, it hit my right arm. It went through my body, left char marks on the concrete steps where I had been sitting. I mean, I felt this burning, searing. It was just horrible, this agonizing pain. And then all of a sudden, I'm just lifting right up out of my body and just peeling up out of me like a banana. And as soon as I come out of myself, I feel nothing. I feel no pain at all. It was like, wow, I don't hurt anymore. This is so cool. But at that particular moment, I didn't know I was dead, even though I could see myself laying there. It didn't register in my mind. And I think it was because it happened so quick, but I didn't have time to think. I go up the stairs and I'm in my house and I'm looking around my house and everything had a burnt gold look to it. And I'm looking at the, straight ahead and I see the curtains on my kitchen window and there are not my curtains. I mean, I was confused. I couldn't think what's going on. So I went into the dining room and I looked around and nothing in there was mine. So I went into the living room, and then that furniture was mine. And then I heard this old time radio show playing. It sounded like something from the Waltons, like the 20s or 30s. And I never had a radio that played anything like that. And I couldn't figure out where that noise was coming from. And I was looking, and there were no people in my house. My family wasn't in my house. And I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. And I started to panic. And when I started to totally lose it, there was this huge, loving, formless presence that appeared. And I felt so loved and so protected. I've never felt love like that before, ever. In my 62 years, I have never felt anything like that. And it was just this being, even though I knew who he was, and it was God, but he was formless. And I'm calling him a he because later on he appeared as a he. This presence was just huge, and just there was nothing. It was just pure love. It just totally engulfed me, and we started moving very quickly, but we didn't move up or down. We moved sideways, and we were going through these beautiful pink and gold clouds. Um, it wasn't storming anymore, I guess. There was just beautiful pink and gold clouds. It was gorgeous. Finally, we got to the end of these pink and gold clouds, and here we just were in this beautiful garden, or just at the entrance of this beautiful garden. And I'm looking around, and everything was so gorgeous. And it felt like the most beautiful spring day. And if you multiply that by 10 bazillion, that's what it was. I mean, perfect temperature, no humidity, sky was blue. The flowers, the colors were just brilliant. There were colors I had no name for. And I heard birds singing, and it was magnificent. But that was just like in the first 2 minutes of being there. I could see all of this stuff. And it was just, wow, And then these two young men stepped forward, and they were in this cream colored linen. It was a linen clothing, and they were glowing, and they were just beautiful. and they were probably between late 20s, early 30s, and they had curly hair, um, longer curly, darker curly hair than mine, but it had this color running through it. At first, I thought they were angels, and then it hit me as soon as they smiled. It was like, oh my God, I know who you are. I looked over my two brothers who had died when I when they were babies, but they were fully grown and they looked exactly like my dad when my dad was a young man. It was like, oh my gosh, it's 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 you. And so we had this wonderful family reunion, and it was absolutely magnificent. And I kept telling them, Dad would be so proud of you. He would be so happy. Stephen was on one side of me, and Michael was on the other, and this presence moved from, beside me to behind me. And so we were all together and we moved in deeper into this garden. And that's why I could hear music playing. I heard the sound of music. It was like everything had a vibration. The leaves had a certain vibration. The grass had a different vibration. There was a stream, and it was gorgeous. It just sparkled like a million diamonds in the light. And that water, as it was going over the rocks, the water had a vibration. The rocks had a different vibration. The trees, the birds, the colors, each color had a vibration. So when you put everything together, each of those vibrations, it sounded like a beautiful orchestra, stringed instruments and drums and horns, and I mean, it was so beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh. And it was everything was singing praises to God. It was just so beautiful. As we were walking through, my brothers were, still with me, and that presence was there. And my brothers actually had to tell me that I had died. I did not know. When my brothers told me I had died, I was like, if this is death, I can do it. This is okay. I see people walking around. I see my brothers. Everybody has a body. Everybody looks great. Everybody's glowing. Um, and I thought, okay, if I'm dead, do I still have a body? So I looked down the front of me to see if I had a body. And my hair was going down the front of me. I could see my clothes. I could see my feet touching the grass. I could feel the grass. So I had all my senses. My senses were so heightened. I was so aware of everything. It was a better version of me, and I was glowing just like everybody else. And it was like, wow, this is cool. Actually, I felt loved. I mean, accepted. I wasn't worried about my hair or my clothes or my makeup or anything like that. I didn't even think about that. I just felt total love and total peace and total contentment and acceptance and all of that. I just love like I've never been loved before. And there was a beautiful, what I call a glorious city, and it was off in the distance. And there's a big wall, a golden wall that surrounded the city, and I could see as if I was right up on the city, but I wasn't. I was like in the garden, but it was like I could see very, very minute detail from very far away. There was a lot of buildings on the outskirts of the city that I could see. Yeah, I could see what looked like a spiritual hospital, like for people like me who died really quick, had no clue what was going on. I had my brothers there to tell me what had happened. I didn't, there's people out there that may not have anyone to tell them what, you know, they die very quick, very tragically, and they have no idea. So they go to this place and there's mentors and teachers and people. It's not like a hospital, not a physical hospital, but a spiritual hospital where people can tell you and can gently bring you to the awareness that, hey, you're dead, you're here now. We're going to help you, teach you what you need to know. So heaven's a very gentle place. I saw a place where children, babies, I could see it looked like Toys R Us on steroids. I mean, it was huge. It was, I mean, all these children of various ages and stages, and they're all running around and playing and jumping and swinging and all. I mean, you name it, and they're doing it. And there's adults there. There's no, no. There's people everywhere in this beautiful place where these babies and children were. So I learned that the children, they will physically and spiritually grow up to a certain age, and then it goes to spiritual growth. And when older people die, they go down, back down to a certain age. So everybody there is between 25 and 35 or whatever. Everyone there's young. There's no one that I saw was over the age of 35 or whatever. I mean, they were all young and all strong and all healthy, and everybody was glowing and everybody had a body, and it was it was just beautiful. My brothers took me to this one gorgeous banquet hall, and there was food, but it's not like we don't need food to sustain life. We can have food because it brings us joy. And when we're here on earth, we gather with friends and family around food. That's apparently what we do in heaven too. You can, if it brings you joy, to gather with friends and family and you eat food. Um, what I saw were people dressed in beautiful dresses, and there was a piano in the corner, and he was playing music, and there were flowers and candelabras, and I mean, it was just very beautiful, very ornate, like a formal party of some sort. I don't know who the party was for, but we stood in the doorway, and I was like, I want to go in. This is so cool because everything was so earth-like and yet so much better. I don't know how to put it. As I'm looking at some of these buildings and I'm thinking about this stuff, it was time for my life review. So we're walking through the garden, and I'm paying attention to everything all at once. We're standing there, and it's my two brothers, me, and then this presence behind me, and there's a screen. It's like watching a screen coming down. And so we're standing there, and there's this movie, a black and white movie of my life from the time I was a baby or the time I was born until the day that or that moment that I died on the back steps. Well, it already seemed like I'd been in heaven forever. I mean, I could have only been there for a couple minutes, but it seemed like I was there for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm watching this life review, and it goes, I'm seeing everything, but I don't have any feeling about it at all. There I am, a baby. Here I am, a teenager. Here I am. Here I am. Okay, bye. It's over. I didn't judge myself. I didn't point out things that I should have done better or didn't do or whatever. I just watched it, and that was it, and it was over. And I felt love. And just before this was going on, there was a whole bunch of people that gathered around, like for support, and they were from all different time periods. I noticed the women were wearing beautiful dresses, and some of the men were wearing, old fashioned fancy suits, and some of the people were wearing modern day clothes. But it looked like people from different time periods. And they knew me, and I knew that I knew them, but I just didn't know where I knew them from. I couldn't remember where did I know you? It was that kind of thing. But everybody was just there. They were smiling. They were loving me. They were not judging me. And this presence behind me was not judging me either. And that's when I learned that this presence, who is God, did not judge me. I didn't judge me. Nobody else judged me. And so it was just over. That's it. I was like, yay, let's move on. Yeah. But I did hear a male voice say, what you put into the universe will come back to you. So I don't know if that was the lesson I was supposed to pick up from watching that. And I was like, I never heard words like that. I never had at that point. It was like, oh, what is that supposed to mean? Then I started feeling like I was hooked up to this giant IV bottle of knowledge. It was like, wow. It was like I was getting all these answers to questions that I couldn't even put into words. I couldn't even voice them before I was getting the answers. And I was just blissfully happy. I learned that God was not complicated, that we human beings complicate him, and he's not complicated. I learned that he is genderless, he is formless, he is spirit, he is total love. But if he chooses to take form, he can, because he's creator of everything. So if he can do anything. He's limitless. He can do anything. So if he wants to take form, he can, and he did. I had seen Jesus. Jesus walked out of a grove of trees and he came over to me and he took me over to this wooded glen. And there was a log laying down on the ground and I sat down on the log. And when I did, Jesus walked away. And there was this man sitting on the log, on the other end of the log. And I knew right away that was God. It had the same feeling of that huge loving presence behind me. And so he said to me, what would you do if it was just me and you? And I said, what? And he said, what would you do if it was just me and you? I didn't know what he meant by that. He said, well, come with me. So we get up and we walk further into the wooded glen, and there's a clearing. And so he kind of waves his hand, and when he does, he opens up the sky. And I could see the vastness of the universe. I saw the stars and the planets and the gases in the sky. And I was just like, wow, this is huge. But there wasn't anything in it. There were no people, no houses, no cars, no nothing. And I thought, if it's all of that and just me and you, I told him, I said, after the first 10 minutes, you would not like me because of all my questions and my chatter. And you just wouldn't like me. And he threw his head back and he started laughing. And his eyes were sparkly. And it was so funny because when he started laughing, I realized what I had said. And then I started laughing at myself. I thought, what a dummy. Who says that? So we went back and we sat back down on the log and he asked me again, what would you do if it was just me and you? And so there was this beautiful, very old oak tree in front of me. And I was looking at the detail of the bark, and I could see the root system and how it was pulling nutrients from the ground and it was going up into the tree and it was feeding the leaves. You could see what the leaves were doing and how the leaves were cleaning the air and how we breathe the air. It was like how every part of that tree was important. The life of that tree was important to everything around it, important to us. We breathe the air, it cleans the air, that kind of thing. Everything is dependent upon everything else. And there's no mistakes. Nothing is a mistake. I looked at God and I said, God, you made this tree. You're in this tree. And when I see this tree, I see you. He said, yes, that's right. So then I started thinking about my parents. And I said, God, you made my parents. You are in my parents. So when I see my parents, I see you. And he said, yes, that's right. Then I started thinking about my children, and I said the same thing, and he said, yes, that's right. Well, then I started thinking about this this person that had hurt me very deeply in my life. And I said, God, there are people in this world that hurt other people. And I said, I don't like them very well, but you made them and you are in them. So when I look at them, I see you. And he said, that's right. And then he said to me, he said, I have a question for you. And I said, okay. And he said, when you look at the mirror, what do you see? And well, my first thought was not much. I thought, oh my gosh, that's not a good answer. You don't tell God, the creator of everything, that he made something that wasn't much. You know, just don't do that. That's mean. So I didn't know what to say really. So I kind of went along with the same lines as I did with everything else. I said, well, God, you made me, you're in me. So when I look in the mirror, I see you. And he was so happy. You know, yeah, that's right. And basically, what he said to me was, I don't make mistakes. I don't make junk. You are not everything that everybody tells you you are. You are what I tell you you are. You are beautiful. I have been told all my adult life that I was ugly, that I was stupid, that I was worthless person, and all this kind of stuff. And so I was believing it. I actually think that, you know, because I was hit by lightning not just once, I was hit 4 times, and it was the last lightning bolt that that took me out. And I think that it was God trying to say, "Hey, I'm trying to talk to you," and I think He was trying to tell me all along not to listen to that kind of stuff, but I wasn't paying attention, and so He kept turning up the volume until I was standing in front of Him. And then he proceeded to tell me about beauty is not out here. We are not our physical bodies. We are what's in here. And this is eternal. This physical part is not eternal. And everybody's body is going to fade. Everybody's body is going to, we're all going to die. You know, our physical body, we are not our physical bodies. He was telling me all of this. And he said, don't listen to those people. Don't listen to the world. Listen to me. It's his opinion is what matters, not everybody else's opinion. During that NDE, I had a bowel blockage and I had surgery, and I had aspirated on the breathing tube during the surgery, and I left my body and I hovered over the table and I could see what they were doing. And it was like, ew, this is not what I want to see. So I kind of went up in the corner of the room and it was like I was sitting in a chair. There was no chair, but I was sitting in a sitting position in the corner of the room. I could still see. And it was like, I don't want to see this. And there was this like upside down whirlpool thing that like was in the ceiling. And I just went right up through that. And then I was standing next to the golden wall that surrounded the city. The wall was so huge, so tall. It was like pure gold cinder blocks, one on top of the other, and it was so huge. You couldn't get through it if you wanted to. You couldn't jump it. I tried. But it didn't dawn on me just to walk a couple feet down to my, let's see, to my left, and the gates were open. And I could hear people talking. I heard music playing. I heard dishes clanging. It sounded like they were getting ready for a party. There's this meadow in front of me, okay, and I'm standing at the wall. The gates are open. There's this meadow of tall grass, and in this grass there was just these wildflowers everywhere. They were so pretty. And once again, I could that light that this the sky was blue. It was like the sun was shining, but there really wasn't a sun in the sky. Everything was lit up. It was just magnificent. I could feel that love and that peace, but it was a little different this time because I didn't have that being with me. But yet I knew that being was there. But there was this little brown and white beagle puppy that was jumping at my feet, and he wanted me to play with him. So I knelt down and I was actually interacting with this little puppy. I was rubbing his tummy and I was playing with him. And every time I tried to stand up, he would start jumping at me. So I was kneeling down and playing with him. And I looked across, I could see, across the meadow, way in the distance was the garden where I had been before. And there were people just pouring out of it. I mean, there were families coming out of it. I saw, there were hundreds of people all coming out of that same place where I had been before. So, but anyway, all these people are walking through this, out of the garden and through the meadow. And it was very clear. I saw two Middle Eastern men, and they had the long white robes on, and they had the white things on their head. And the two of them, they were young, and the two of them were just looking at each other, and they were talking and laughing. Everybody that I saw, it was, you have the people, and then behind the person, there was an angel. All the angels looked exactly the same. They were taller and more illuminated than the people were. They wore white robes and they had like a blue sash. They came out of the garden with their angels, and these two men, they walked right past me. And I noticed them and I thought they looked very handsome and they were smiling. They just were, you know, very happy. And they walked right into the city. And then there was a man who, I don't know why, I think he was like a telephone worker or a construction worker from New York. I don't know what made me think that, but he still had his hard hat on and he still had a tool belt or a vest that had tools stuck down in the vest. And he walked past me and he went into the city. And that, like I said, there were many more, but there were certain people that stood out. Then there was this younger man who was escorting an older gentleman. I recognized the younger of the two from some pictures that a friend had showed me. It was her son who had died years ago, and he was escorting this older gentleman into the city when they walked right up to me. And I looked at him and I said, "Oh my gosh, I know you." And so he smiled at me and this was his dad, and he took his dad and he walked him into the city. I was just like, I was excited that I saw somebody that I knew. So I got back into my body, okay, and I'm in recovery. I still have a breathing machine on. When the nurse, it was a male nurse, when he realized that I was, moving or whatever, he unhooked the breathing machine. And so I'm laying there and I'm thinking to myself, what just happened? Because again, I felt like I was there forever and everything was so brilliant and so beautiful and the colors. And then I'm back here. It wasn't like I had a choice in the matter. There was no conversations about whether I was to stay or go and any of my NDEs. It was just like, this happened and then you're going back. Well, When I got back into my room after I was in recovery for a while, I went back into my room and I got on my phone and there was a message. The lady, the mother of the young man that I saw, her husband had died that day while I was in surgery. And I said, I know, because I saw her son with him and they went into the city. So that was just like huge. I was, oh my God, you could tell even now I'm speechless when I talk about it. It's just like, oh my gosh. Sometimes it blows me away because I didn't know this older man. I knew the younger guy and I knew the mother. But when I saw him, I mean, I had no idea. And then I got the message that he had died. I'm like, oh no. But later that evening, my daughter came to visit me at the hospital, and I told her what happened, this whole story. And I told her about the little cute little fat roly poly beagle puppy. And she told me, she said, Mom, we had to call the police because there was a neighbor down the street that we saw he had beaten his beagle puppy to death. So the man got arrested for doing that. And so I was able to tell my daughter that the beagle puppy was fine. And he was just jumping all over everywhere. And he was flipping himself over and rolling around. He was so cute. He was so fat and cute. And I told her, I said, he's fine. He's okay. He's not suffering, and he doesn't remember it. He's okay. So that was huge for her. That was really a confirmation for her, or a helpful thing for her to know that, you know what, our pets do go to heaven and they might suffer here just like we suffer sometimes here, but we're okay when we get there, you know? We're okay.
Before I drowned, I was hearing my heart beating very loud. It was like a drum, like boom, 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 boom. The call was so intense that it was just this. And from there, it was the realization why I cannot breathe. The moment I was in this state of absolute horror, in just a blink like that, I entered into the space of calmness and tranquility and just it was just this space of absolute peace. My path of realizing who I am started since I was very little, and this all, I guess, started to happen when I had experience in which I drowned and I had what is known as near death experience. What happened is that back then I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I lived there with my parents, my sisters, and my parents will go to work and they will leave us at the care of a maid. I was just very little, close to 3 years old. And when my parents were not around, this lady really didn't care much about what we were doing. And then one morning they left, and my oldest sister, who was close to 4, and I decided, let's go play in the patio. She's not watching. So we went there, and in the patio, there was a big tank. And the purpose of this tank was to collect water for hand washing clothes, because back then we didn't have a washing machine. And then, but this tank was big, it held about 900 gallons of water. So we just, hey, not thinking about anything. We just saw a couple of balls and decided, oh, let's play cash across the tank. It was a tank entirely made of cement. It had a roof. It was 6 in the morning. I was leaning very precariously in this tank. And she threw the ball. She didn't apply enough force. The ball fell on the water. It was floating. And I thought, oh, I can grab it. And I leaned forward. And when I leaned forward and touched the ball, it rolled. And then I fell in the tank. So the last thing I saw with my eyes open was the darkness of the space. And yeah, it was the sense of entering into darkness. Imagine the first feeling was this water is frigid cold, like my breath was taken, like the cold was so intense that it was just this. And from there, it was the realization why I cannot breathe. I never had been under the water. We didn't have a bathtub. I never been in a pool. So for me, it was this horror of what is going on, why I cannot breathe. So imagine the terror I experienced at this moment. And the magic happened. The moment I was in this state of absolute horror, in just a blink like that, I entered into the space of calmness and tranquility and just it was just this space of absolute peace. And then when the scene, something started to happen, was the first thing I saw was light. So imagine the sense, like now that I am peaceful and now I am like, there is light. And the light was like the light of a candle that was coming from below. And it was this soothing, calming light, but at the same time, it was strong enough to illuminate my whole watery surrounding. And the fact that before I died or I drowned, I was hearing my heart beating very loud. And I imagine the terror, and I could hear it in my head. It was like a drum, like boom, 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 boom. And it was suddenly silence. All the noise was gone. And I experienced this profound, profound silence. We can even describe it nowadays, now that I have more words to talk about all these, as like stillness, that peace. And that silence, the other way I name it is silence behind the silence, was so profound that I craved that silence for the rest of my life. So what happened next is, now that I am in the light, I am in this peaceful silence, when I started to see bubbles. And the bubbles were surrounded by light. And imagine, it's like, wow, this is so cool. And it's when I saw these bubbles that I started to just chase them. And when I'm chasing the bubbles, I turn around and I saw my body. And my body was floating there in the water with the eyes open. The body didn't have life. You know, when we said that the eyes are the expression of the soul, the heart, when I saw that face, it was like an empty shell. When I was looking at the body, it's important to mention that I was born as a very sick child. For the first 3 years of my life, almost 3 years, I was always unwell. I didn't even know what well-being was. I was always sick. And then now I am in the state of absolute well-being. So imagine what I was experiencing was like, what? No, I'm not going back to that sick body. And at that moment, I had the clarity that I could make that decision, that I don't want to go back there. And I turned around and I left the body behind. And as I turned around and left the body behind, I started to see flowers. And the flowers were blooming from nowhere. And it was this majestic feeling of this is incredible. And then even the sense of dimension changed when I was now picked up by the flowers. Imagine how big a flower has to be to pick you up. And then I'm picked up by flowers and I was being carried. And I was in the state of complete relaxation, complete bliss. And is when I put the analogy that is like going back to the womb where you don't have to do anything. You're just being carried, you're just being done. And at that moment, something incredible happened. In just a blink, I appear in the maid's room and I'm floating above her bed. She's just there listening to soap operas in the radio, not even knowing at all what is happening. And then I'm floating above her and I'm like, oh, that's Maria. Nothing with Maria. And then after that, now in another flash like that, I appear in my mom's path. What I mean with this is that she didn't have a car, she was walking and she was almost close to her bus stop. And then now, like with Maria, I'm floating above her. And I think this is the part that one validates the experience, and two, I think blows everybody's minds away. And is the moment I saw my mom, I said, "Oh, that's mom." My mom stopped. She fell, and she knew that something was happening at home with one of her babies, and she didn't even hesitate. I like to mention something because at that moment my mom had got a new job. And what is that we humans usually would do? Oh no, I have to, I mean, like, really, I have to go to my new job. You will not listen to that intuition because the call of responsibility with your job probably is higher. But she said that, yeah, that day she even hit her. She felt it, she heard it. She's like, it was so compelling that it was a pull, that it was not even that she could do anything else. And she turned around and she started to run back home. And then I'm looking at my mom and I'm like, oh, wait, I wonder why she's running. And then at that moment, I change my view, and at the horizon, I see a dog, and I adore animals. So the moment I see this dog, I forgot about my mom, and I am with the dog. And then the moment I'm with the dog, I'm like, wow, what just happened? Then I saw a park, and the moment I feel the desire of being in the park, I am in the park. So it's like, it's like now time and space as we know it had completely changed, and I could be anywhere at any time just by that simple desire. And then I started to play a game. This is so much fun. I'm playing this game of going places. And then this is when another incredible thing happened, and is in another jump, in another flash. Everything in this experience was like that. So in another flash, I am in a realm that is made of pure, bright, intense, shiny light. And when I am in this realm is when I felt for the first time. Again, it was that feeling that when we talk about feeling before seeing, it was the feeling of I am home. I am home. Yeah, the first thing I perceived was this light, but it came immediately with the sense like I am back home. And the sense of home, you feel welcome, embraced, it feels so good. And this is the moment when something also incredible happened. Despite that I had seen my body suspended in the water, I did not have the realization that that was not me. I was still, of course, the mind and the body attached. And at this moment is when I realized I am not that. I am not that. I am not that body. I'm not that persona. And I realized myself as a being of light. And at that moment, it was like I started to feel the sense of dissolving, connecting with everything. I just completely detached and I experienced what I call nothingness. And some people may say that nothingness seems scary. What do you mean nothing? And I said, yeah, it was that sense of nothing, absolutely nothing I could describe or give a name or give texture or color or form or meaning or. And when I say this to give an analogy, somebody shared this with me and I thought it was an incredible analogy. Imagine that all you knew about yourself was a little box in the middle of a stadium, and that's what you thought you were, that little box. And suddenly that box opens and you realize, it's nothing, because it's nothing I thought I was, but it's wholeness, because it turns in the totality of everything. And at that moment, it was that sense of complete interconnection, knowing that you're not a separate entity in that box, you are that totality. You're connected with everything. And it was that sense of expansion and that sense of is is you lack words. I think all of us that have had these experiences, like, you don't know how to explain that. And it was all coming from the center. It was like expansion. And I think the only words I could say is a state of pure consciousness and absolute presence. When I am in this state of being, my mom finally arrives home. And this is amazing because we live in a pretty big house, but she knew exactly where to go. And she could, if she would have decided go to another room, of course the body cannot hold that much. But one thing that saved my body was that the water was frigid cold. So my mom ran to the patio, and right there where my sister was still there, and she was trying to get me out of the tank herself. So when my mom entered the patio, she looked at my sister, and my sister said, Ingrid is there and I cannot get her. My mom jumped in the tank. She got me out. She said that I was like a raggedy doll. No pulse, no breathing, completely pale, blue nails, leaves. And then my mom, this is everything. I just keep saying this is incredible, but it's like that because there's all these synchronicities in life also that were playing their part. And is that my mom worked with children, and she had received some training to do CPR for children. So my mom knew exactly. She didn't know that training. Maybe she, I don't know what she would have done, but at that moment she started to do anything she knew to revive me. And I was so disconnected from this body that I did not feel absolutely anything. Nothing she was doing. The only thing that I felt is that suddenly I felt that I had jumped from the tallest building in the world, and there was nothing I could do to stop this. And I felt the sense that I was falling, like, no, it was a sense of like vacuum. And my reaction to that was like, no, I didn't want to come back. And I knew I was back in the body when all the feelings of coldness and that lack, the expansion feeling I was having. Imagine getting reduced to like, whoop, no, being back in the box. And I just felt the sense of being very angry and not wanting to be here. I was pretty angry, and I refused to eat. I refused to be here. I didn't even want to be touched, connected with anyone. And when I was looking at my parents, what happened is I came back with an awareness I didn't have before. And when people say, but before you were so little, guess what? Because it's not about the age in your physical body right now, it's about the eternal existence of your soul. So I guess in my case, I meant to remember faster. Another thing that happened that I think is important to mention, when I came back from my uh, childhood near death experience, I had abilities. And that's another thing that validated the experience. And it was, imagine I was about to be just 3 years old. And no longer after I came back, I could read, I could write, I could put together complex puzzles, I could resolve mathematical problems, I could paint, and it was all there. And for me, was the sense, and in school, it was incredible. I was brilliant because it was the sense I don't have to learn anything. I'm just remembering. Starting to remember who I was. So when now I look at my parents, I look at my body, first I am seeing my parents and I have that clarity. They're not just my parents. I felt them as my equal because I had experienced the state of oneness and I became very rebellious. Why do I have to listen to you? The other thing, I look at myself and I said, I'm not this child. I am not this child. So imagine how hard it had to be because I now am this childlike body, but in my inner, I don't feel that way. So I never felt like a child again. And when I would look at other children, I would be like, what is happening to that people? They don't know anything. So I think that what saved me and saved my parents was that I started to see what I called and keep calling until today beings of light. And this is the other thing when people ask me, how can you remember? And I said, one, because I already mentioned all the contrast, all the trauma, everything that happened. But two, because for me, the experience never ended. After my near death, I started to have near death out of body experiences. Then I started to have the connection with the beings of light, and it continued. It's like for me, the door never closed. And later in my life, the beings of light said to me, Ingrid, because I kept repeating that sentence, and they said, of course the door never closed, because guess what? There are no doors. What we call the kingdom of heaven, God, source, the Father, the Creator, consciousness is here for all of us. Always is what we are. But due to conditioning and due to experiences and due to our family burdens, whatever it is, we close the door. I was in, I guess I call it the spiritual eyes, because I was in, I will go to sleep and I will go to that state in which I will go back to that realm of the light. And it to go there, it was at the beginning was pretty dramatic. I will go to sense, it was the sense of accelerating, and I have experienced speeds like really fast and very slow, speeds, movements that I have never experienced in my human experience. I've seen colors that I have never describe a color you've never seen here is impossible. So it's just incredible because I have seen all these colors, movements, frequencies, all kind of stuff, that sounds that actually for the human mind can be very scary. But because I will go back to the realm of the light, that was the reward. in one of these journeys is like, imagine at night when you go outside and you see all the stars. Imagine seeing that, but everything is light, and I was seeing stars like figures shining in all different colors to the infinite. So this was absolutely majestic. And I would just be mesmerized. At the beginning, I didn't know what it was. I was just, because also in the pureness of the mind, now when we're adults, we grow, we need to give name to everything. And this has to be this, and this has to be described this way. At that moment, with the pure mind of a child, I didn't need all these descriptions. I was just experiencing it. And in another one of these journeys, one of these beings that was shining in like golden light shaped itself into a human form. And is when I said, you are a being of light, a being of light. I am a now 3-year old. This is a being made of light. So the being touched me, and I'm like, I realized we are the same. And then I woke up, but I imagine those days I was sleeping a lot because I wanted to be in this. But since again, look at how perfect everything is. Since I was a child, oh, a child is sleeping a lot. That's good. We don't have to. The new maid didn't have to pay attention to this child that's sleeping a lot. But of course, I could not be the child that slept forever. So balance was needed. And that balance came in which one day I'm taking a shower, all relaxed in the shower, and then a light blue, intense blue light shone in the bathroom. And then I'm like, now the beings of light are here. And that was a very important moment, Lauren, in my life, because, like I said to you, up to this point, I was very angry. I didn't want to talk to anyone, play with my sisters. I was rebellious, and I wanted to be there. And the moment I started to see the beings of light here, imagine, was like, now they are here. Now they are here. So that, to me, that was the sense of like, now I can be home here. So, and that was a very important teaching that I took me many years to understand, but later was revealed to me in the sense that was the understanding that home is not a place, is a state of being. And I started to eat and play with my sisters and experience Ingrid more, and like, oh yes, this is my human experience. But something else happened. I was still very detached from my name and from my persona. And then when they would call me Ingrid, I would just feel, "Ay." And I would look at myself in the mirror and say, my mom, you have to understand this is not me. She didn't even know what I was talking about. I didn't have the words to explain, but I was like, this is not me. This is not my name. And then I always kept saying, that's not my name. And then the maid called me one night for dinner, and she's like, Ingrid, time for dinner, time for dinner. I'm like, ignore, and I would get aggravated. And then she came and she's like, we're calling you for dinner. Then I said, stop calling me, because she said, Ingrid, we're calling you. And I said, stop calling me like that. That's not my name. Imagine that. Is like, oh Lord. So she said, then how should I call you? What is your name? And I turned and I said, I do not need one. And I was throwing my tantrum crying when I heard his voice. But again, you hear, but it's the hearing that comes with profound feeling, and I call it the inner senses. And it's when I heard the voice that said, it's going to take time for them to understand that names are not needed in the realm of the light. And they say, like, you already know. So for me, it was like, I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. And of course, I want to make clear to people that later, of course, I understood that our name is important. We need a name in our human experience. Names are beautiful, they carry frequency, but it was also knowing that in the pureness of our being, we do not need names. This other thing they said to me, your experience, the experience that you had, and the experience that you are going to have, someday in the future you will share with others when you're ready and when they are ready. And they say you will never be alone, but don't talk to others about this because they're not going to understand. So imagine a child, 5 years old, 4 years old, listening that others cannot understand this and realizing it too pretty quick, because anytime I talk to anybody, it was like this child is dreaming, especially we do it with children. She's has this big imagination, whatever, and then nobody really understood or believed or whatever was. But not, it was not the case with everybody, because they said there will be people in your path to guide you and to teach you and to validate you. And it was my mom and my grandmother, my father. When I asked them, being so I was a child, and I said, why me? Why this is happening to me? And I would cry because no one imagined, no one understood. I felt isolated. I felt alone. And it was, I would just say, where is the manual? Why is this happening to me? And then they said, the first answer, they said, because you are special. And I said, what do you mean when you say that I am special? And the answer is absolutely beautiful. What they said to me, they say, everybody is special, but not everybody knows it yet. And you are starting to know it. So but it will take time, and you will bring that to others so they can also start remembering who they are. It's not about near dead. It's about learning to live. Near life experience. How do I live my life to the fullest? How I live every moment, and I take this human experience as my opportunity to know myself deeper, to know you, to know everyone deeper, to connect deeper, to love deeper, to smile deeper, to just have a blast. Even is hard, but if it wasn't hard, it would be boring. It's hard and it's easy. So it's play the game of life and enjoy it as much as you can.
To go from violence and chaos that is so abrupt and beyond understanding to all of a sudden, where am I? But I am enveloped and I feel this tremendous love. It is so deep and so profound. It's not male or female. And I was aware of that as a child. It was just this deep, deep spiritual love. And everything was a frequency, everything was a resonance. There are colors. We are limited by our mind and our physical body of what our understanding is, and really what our capabilities are. We are confined by our physical body and our mind, which on the other side we are not. We are in our origin, which is our spirit. When you go to the other side, there is this feeling of it's endless. It is this most extraordinary, endless place of love and resonance and music and vibration and so much more that you can't understand. what happened was it was a moment of chaos and other people there, and I left my body. I died and went to the other side. And going through the tunnel, it was very fast. It's this dark, kind of dark tunnel. It has some lights in it. It's a vortex, so it's moving in a circular motion. And I just got swept into it very easily. Uh, I think it was that I was so disoriented and I didn't know what was going on. This was before I was 7 years old, so I was limited in my understanding of the world, self, language, everything. And when I left the tunnel, it was like so fast. It was like and it was dark mainly, but there were lights. And as I moved through this tunnel, the lights became brighter and more accented, and then I was on the other side. And oh, I get so emotional still because to go from violence and chaos that is so abrupt and beyond understanding to all of a sudden, where am I? But I am enveloped and I feel this tremendous love. It is so deep and so profound. It's not male or female. And I was aware of that as a child. And that it wasn't my mother, it wasn't my father, it wasn't my sister or my brother. It was just this deep, deep spiritual love. It felt so safe. And yeah, I mean, it was the most amazing experience. We all get what's called a life review. And what that is we look at, with guidance, with wisdom, with God, our education. We see how we've reacted, and it's explained to us why we reacted in that way. And it's usually because of a thought form we've acquired that really doesn't work for us anymore. And so our behavior can be inappropriate or hurtful at times for people. And what you are taught is it isn't that someone really wanted to be that way, but it is their persona or their neurological functioning or something about their DNA or sometimes karma that puts us in these situations. And for me, I was looking at this violence that I didn't understand, but I also, being out of body, and because we are all wisdom and we are consciousness, I understood, even though as a child I didn't have the language or the understanding. I did during the life review because I wasn't confined to the age of being before I was 7 years old. So I had my wisdom, and so I was able to understand what the life review was teaching me was that everything, the only truth, is love. I was taken to all these different areas that are on the other side that, again, my journey was all frequency. I was taken to a place where it's a choir. It's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of out-of-body spirit that are singing tones that all harmonize. I heard tones that I had never ever heard, and harmonies. And what I got, see, the journey doesn't end with when you come back to your body. And one thing I have found is that in different places of the world, I hear these choirs of angels. You know, they always say silence isn't empty. it is filled with answers and it is filled with wisdom. On the other side, it's just endless, all the opportunities that are over there. But there was this wall that went on for eternity, and it was like bricks, little squares that made this wall. And you could pull this wall out and it would expand. And it was as if it was every single moment going on simultaneously in the world. So, I mean, it was an endless wall. And where I was taken to was to look at things that I could relate to and to just watch. Some of my experience on the other side was to just watch, and then I had someone explain things to me about, why people do what they do. Being shown, being taken to other places of frequency and resonance. I was asked, do you want to stay here or do you want to go back? And in that moment, I thought of my dog and my mother and I missed them. And I said that, and like a shot, bam, I was back. I was just that quick. So often I have clients call me and say, I've been praying and nothing's happening and I feel abandoned by God. And the thing is, no, we are not. We are so. We are so never abandoned by what gives us life and what gives us love. Never. I get so emotional because it seems that in life now, so many people are struggling. And they struggle because what happens is they want to have something given to them, or a memory, or an adventure that they'll have once they let go of their way their mind has decided it should come to them. If we just give up and say, God, help me, lead me, guide me, we are. So often what happens is that I see people aren't able or capable of receiving love. Just like I'm sure you've known friends, or it maybe even happened to you a long time ago, where someone would compliment you and you downplay it. Oh no, it's not really. No, it's yeah, I got the haircut. Yeah, it's fine. It's like that's just like a particle of the drop of the ocean of why we reject things, and underneath that are a myriad of reasons, whether we don't feel worthy, or we don't want to compete, or we feel if we're going to achieve something we're going to make someone else unhappy or take it away from them, so we downplay ourselves. And that is the biggest, I think, influence of the other side that I got. I kind of went off topic on my NDE, but my NDE has carried through my life, uh, from the time my first, and I've had two NDs, but this was my first one, was so significant because it every step of my life has been reflective of what has come to me from that other side. Yeah, it it was like, what? That's kind of how I felt at first, because it was like, what happened? And then all of a sudden I had people show up. They had kind of a form of a human body, but they were not a human body. And I could hear with telepathic, clear audience, um, or technique of being in trance with a mediumship. All those are way of hearing high frequency sound or frequency sound. And it was a way of continuing my education. I had very shortly after that experience, I had this experience with my mother. We were using the Ouija board, and all of a sudden the lights got really dark. The lights just dimmed. And all of a sudden it was almost like we felt this, in the symphony, those big, huge drums, when they start going boo, and you hear the drum and the resonance goes out. It was like I heard that. And all of a sudden, there was this massive, dark blob of energy at the side of the table between my mother and me and the Ouija board. And my mother went, "What just happened?" And I said, "Well, the lights dimmed. A spirit came in. It's big and really black, and it's standing in between. It's standing right next to us." And she went, "We're going to put this away now, and we're never going to use it again." And we didn't. And she said a prayer, and I said, okay, and it went away. But I didn't know that at the time that my mother could read energy. And so she was really my teacher that started to teach me how to get in touch with environmental energy. We'd be driving and we'd be at a stop sign, and she'd go, and of course she was driving, I was a child, and she'd go, "What do you feel?" And there was most of the time when she would ask me this, it was all like violent situations. But I remember distinctly one time where I said I am in a passenger seat, and there's a man driving, a man behind me, and he's just put something around my neck and he's killing me. And she said, absolutely right. She saw it too. And she said, "And what happens then?" And I said, "They take a right and they go that way, because we're at the stoplight." And she said, "Yes." And they're going to the lake that's in there where they dump bodies. And later I found that they did dump bodies in that place. And so she was like, "So you're never to go there. You won't be safe there. Don't go there." And so discernment is this. Before my NDE, when I was little, I would feel energy without knowing what it was, but I would go towards it. And after my NDE, what I learned was there's a resonance that's about love. There's a resonance that's about kindness, that's about joy, and there's some about harm and oppression and death and murder. And so for me, working with energy, I didn't understand this for a long time, but I do now, is that since I do work with energy, one of my lessons was learning how to discern, how to decide in which direction to go depending on the energy I was feeling. Because I came back so connected to this love that, I mean, it just, wow. Um, it never left me. And so my pursuit has always been about understanding and consciousness. The more we understand, the more we can achieve. We always have someone with us. And part of our journey in the spiritual world, if we, commit to it and dedicate ourselves to it, is learning to hear and talk to our spiritual guidance. And we can get so much amazing information through that. And so the guidance is one thing I do. I caution everyone that's going to be channeling or hearing out of body spirit is to really discern, to know what frequencies you want to live with and what frequencies you want to bring in to have a discussion with. Because I've done a lot of environmental clearing and lifting and investigations of houses and areas that are considered haunted, and they are. There's a lot of spirit world life that is in the fourth and dimension, and can have wisdom and can talk to us like they have a lot of knowledge, and then they'll twist it because they are not who they say they are. And so when you're going to get information from your higher self, your guidance, be very specific. And I bring in the light, I bring in this as my belief system, and I ask to be protected in the love of consciousness, and that I will only accept the energy, the wisdom, the information, the healing energy from this source, and it's the source that you believe in. Like for me, I will not accept any energy that is not from my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, in the name of God Almighty, creator of everything. In that context is also the wisdom of Buddha and the wisdom of Bahalu. Just to add one thing, because people ask me this a lot, is that our pets do go to heaven. People are like, well, I see my dog again. Absolutely, you will. And you can also call upon them, and they can come to you in spirit too, because they exist. They just and that we don't die. Our life is continual. Reincarnation is so real. And what we are is we go on in our journey in a new way on the other side. We transform. And so I think that is the other question I get asked the most: is there the fear of death? And there's no fear. There's no guilt. There's no punishment. There's none of that. And there's no death. There's just, we continue in a different way. It's just like on the other side, there's no evil. There is absolutely no evil on the other side, because the other side is the one truth, which is love. And through the spiritual understanding, what I believe is that the evil does not exist. The only truth is love. And there is nothing that can survive, that can squash that love and survive above it. It just won't happen, because love is the one truth.